What is your role as a woman in a relationship with a man? Do you even have a distinct and different role from the man? In the story Peter Pan, the boy who wouldn't grow up, written by J.M. Barrie and later adapted into a Disney film, Peter Pan is a boy who lives on a lonely island called Neverland, a place where children never grow up. But every night he would leave the island and fly to London to the Darling family's house, where he would sit by the open nursery window to listen to the mother, Mary, telling bedtime stories to her children, Wendy, the eldest daughter, and her two younger brothers, Michael and John. One night, Peter is discovered by the siblings, and when he tries to escape, he loses his shadow. When he returns to retrieve it, he meets Wendy, who manages to sew his shadow back onto him with thread and needle. Thus, Peter learns that Wendy knows many bedtime stories and invites her to Neverland to be the mother of his gang, the Lost Boys, children who got lost when they fell from their prams. What does it mean that Wendy sews Peter's shadow back on? The shadow, psychologically, represents the parts of our psyche that we don't want to see, primarily aggression and sexuality. Sexuality is the gateway to life, but it also leads to the recognition that we are all mortal, because there is no life without death. And Peter Pan, as we know, is stuck in childhood and doesn't grow up. So he's not connected to his shadow, not connected to the recognition that time passes and death approaches, nor to the fact that he is a sexual being who is supposed to become a father one day. Additionally, losing his shadow indicates Peter's avoidance of connection with the real physical world, where one of the most common physical characteristics is the shadow created by any object that light falls upon. When this connection of Peter to his shadow means she is making him grow up, forcing him to recognize that he cannot live forever, at least not in her home, in the real world. She confronts him with the dark aspects of existence, with death. And this will of course be a recurring motif throughout the story. Wendy's role is to make Peter grow up. Here it is worth noting the meaning of the name Pan. Pan is a Greek god associated with nature, wildness, and a free, carefree spirit. The figure of Pan in mythologies is portrayed as mischievous and childlike. Additionally, the word Pan in Greek means all, and this is one of the things that characterizes children. They are a mass of potential. They can be anything. So Wendy's role is actually more than making Peter grow up. It's to help him realize his potential, because any realization of potential necessarily means you're no longer Pan. You're not everything. You must commit and focus on something to realize yourself, and in doing so, you're actually giving up all the hypothetical futures you could have had for one future that moves from potential to actual. One future instead of infinity, instead of everything, but at least this future materializes and becomes present. It's no coincidence that in Hebrew the word forward, kadima, shares the same root as the word for before, kodem. And also in English, the words forward and before share the same root, because at least in Semitic languages such as Hebrew, there is a deep connection between time and space. Hebrew is a language born in a culture that respects the past and relies on it. The past precedes you, it was before you, and you must rely on it when deciding where to go. Therefore, when you move forward in physical space, you do so based on what preceded you in the space of time. So in Hebrew, the correct order is indeed that the future becomes present, not that the present becomes future. And this is the process that everyone needs to go through, giving up everything they could have been in order to become one real thing that gives them identity as a mature person and an integral part of culture and society. Wendy essentially forces Peter to find his place in the world of adults and adopt a defined identity. Wendy and her brothers join Peter in Neverland, and there something interesting happens. Wendy becomes the mother of the Lost Boys, but her brothers, the boys, don't in turn become the fathers of the Lost Boys, but rather join the band of Lost Boys themselves and adopt their wild and uncivilized way of life. They quickly forget their parents and their home in London. Wendy, on the other hand, remains in the role of the responsible adult. Neverland doesn't affect her. Why is this? Because men outside of culture, which is represented by parents and home, get lost and forget their purpose much more easily than women. Women have something innate that anchors them to reality and their purpose, and that is the fact that they are mothers and they have a limited time window to fulfill their purpose as such, so they do not need to rely as much on culture to remind them of their role. This is why initiation rites are much more common and significant for men than for women. In tribal societies, it is customary for boys to undergo tests that include isolation from home, hunting, and physically and mentally challenging tasks that also require courage to initiate them into their role as men. For girls, biology largely suffices to initiate the young woman. She gets her period, her body changes, especially when she becomes pregnant. All these in themselves constitute initiation rites. Additionally, the maternal role is seen as something much more natural, which women know how to do instinctively. Indeed, our brain didn't develop and grow relative to our primate relatives in order to care for a baby, but rather to allow us to be cultural beings, to transcend our nature. That's why a recurring motif in many films is when a mother of one species raises a baby of another species, whether human or another animal. We instinctively accept that a mother is a mother regardless of what animal she is and what animal her baby is. Our brain, particularly the prefrontal cortex, developed to turn us into cultural beings, to discipline us and allow us to delay gratification, to manage our nature. Therefore, the basic maternal role is much more instinctive. Being a cultured person, a moral person, is a process that requires much more time and effort from both parents, which is why humans are the creatures with the longest adolescence in nature, because it takes a tremendous amount of time to turn a helpless child into a functional adult. A boy then needs to be initiated by other men in the tribe, by culture, to become a man. His chance of becoming a man without initiation is much smaller. Women, on the other hand, need fewer reminders and initiation. They are born to their purpose. They don't need to become such. This can be seen even in our society today. Men still seek more structured initiation than women in sports, clubs, military, or challenging journeys in nature. Women turn more to inward journeys, connection to spirituality, personal development workshops, or mutual support frameworks. From first-hand experience, and also from what my colleagues tell me, it is evident how much more receptive the female audience is to self-work content compared to men. For the same reason, in Judaism, women have fewer commandments, particularly time-bound commandments, such as the evening and morning Shema prayer and blowing the shofar. These commandments align with masculine traits of framework, boundaries, and precision. Women, on the other hand, are exempt from these commandments because they are perceived as naturally connected to the divine essence and to the home, which is perceived as the spiritual and physical center of life. Men need reminders, while women's connection to holiness is more innate. In light of this, it's no wonder that the female character who actually belongs to Neverland and with whom Peter Pan has a relationship that might be more than just friendly, as it's evident she becomes jealous when Wendy enters the picture, is Tinkerbell. And it's no coincidence that she's a tiny and childish fairy when among all the creatures on the island, she's the farthest from being a real human. Because a real human female needs to be that much more disconnected from her roots to reach a state where she forgets her parents and culture. Additionally, in the final scene of the story that takes place a year later, when Peter returns to visit Wendy, we discover that Tinkerbell died during that year because fairies, unlike lost boys, have a short lifespan. And this is, of course, true because women discover fast, much faster than men, how quickly their youthful magic fades. Perhaps more painful than seeing a 50-year-old man who is still a child is seeing a 50-year-old woman who still thinks she's a fairy, because nature is crueler to women. So Peter Pan lives outside of culture and outside of time, and he is very afraid of growing up and taking responsibility. And truth be told, when you see who the only adult character in Neverland is, you can't blame him. The only adult man is, of course, Captain Hook, who is also Peter's nemesis. Hook is named after the hook that replaced his hand when Peter cut it off in one of their battles. This hand fell into the water and was eaten by a crocodile, and since then the crocodile has been chasing Hook, wanting to eat the rest of his body. This crocodile also swallowed a ticking clock, and since then Hook, in the form of classical conditioning, is also afraid of clock sounds. What does it mean that Hook was eaten by a crocodile that swallowed a clock? The crocodile represents time. Time that consumes every person, that brings death closer. Each of us is Hook, in the sense that time gnaws at us. We're all on borrowed time. And what does it mean that Hook fears the ticking crocodile? That he is Peter Pan but grown up. Hook is what happens to overgrown children who run from the responsibility that comes with age and aren't willing to grow up. Time eats them up before they realize themselves and they become bitter and frustrated. Hook represents the negative side of adult masculinity, dictatorial, bitter, and fearful. Masculinity full of resentment towards the younger generation represented by Peter. Masculinity that can't come to terms with its past and that isn't interested in initiating and raising a new generation, and that sees youth only as a rebellious force trying to undermine the existing order, not as potential for renewal and refreshment that the old order needs in order to continue forward to future generations. Healthy adult masculinity is one that encourages the younger generation to want to become like it on one hand, and on the other hand respects its uniqueness and innovation and encourages it to integrate it within itself so that it doesn't deteriorate and petrify as happened to Captain Hook. The only way for culture not to be eaten by time and continue to exist is if it finds the balance between preserving the past and integrating the new. Therefore, healthy masculinity nurtures and initiates the younger generation, doesn't despise it like Hook. And again, men in general, more than women, are likely to fall into the temptation of escaping from time. Women have a biological clock that even plastic surgeries can't stop, but men theoretically can have children until old age. Therefore, they need more than just passing time to grow up. During the story, Wendy falls in love with Peter after he saves Tiger Lily, one of the girls on the island, from Captain Hook's captivity. But when she asks him what his feelings are for her, he gives her the disappointing answer, the feelings of a devoted son. Wendy doesn't fall in love with Peter the child, but with brave-hearted Peter, who proves he's capable of doing the right thing and risking himself to save a damsel in distress. But when she realizes that Peter still hasn't completely grown up, she doesn't delude herself and returns to her parents without him. Additionally, it's hinted to us that Wendy's mother, Mrs. Darling, knows Peter from before, meaning she might have met him when she herself was young. That means Wendy's mother reflects to us where Wendy's decision to leave Peter and return to reality will lead her. She will put the unrequited love behind her, marry a man, not a boy, and have children of her own. Wendy didn't insist on converting Peter Pan and turning him into her man when she understood he was a lost case or lost boy. Instead, she decided to choose from the start a man who is willing to commit and take responsibility and who just needs a woman to help him take the final step. So, what can you learn about your role as a woman from this classic story? That you need to ensure your maternal instinct, whether when it expresses itself in caring for a helpless baby, in caring for the weak, or in trying to heal the wounds in an adult man's soul, doesn't get out of control. You need to make sure this instinct doesn't permit and even encourage childish behavior and lack of responsibility. When this story shows us what happens when women fall into the trap of being the fixer, it only allows eternal children to feel they have a mother who cares for them and thus continue to remove responsibility from themselves. However, Wendy understands, when Peter doesn't return romantic love, that she fell into a trap and therefore returns home and leaves him. In other words, your role as a woman is to encourage the man to take responsibility and grow up, but not to be his mother, meaning to take responsibility instead of him. You, by your very nature being more connected to your purpose than the man, can give the man the gift of inspiring him to be more like you, meaning also connected to his highest purpose, to leave behind childish games and start taking on heavier responsibility. We see this behavior embodied also in Nala in the Lion King story. Simba grows up in the jungle alongside Timon and Pumbaa and lives a carefree life without worries. The motto they teach him, Hakuna Matata, literally means no worries. Simba, who was supposed to be a king, behaves like a good-for-nothing man, hanging out with lousy friends who are beneath his level, and instead of hunting gazelles in the savannah, he eats insects. That is, he forgot who he is and what his purpose is. He forgot he is a king. So too, his father Mufasa tells him, "You've forgotten who you are," when his image appears before me in the lake and then appears in the sky. Then Simba finally remembers that he is actually a king and understands that he needs to return to the kingdom and fight Scar and fulfill his destiny. But who is the catalyst for that remembrance of purpose? None other than Nala, his childhood friend. She encounters him in the jungle while searching for help to save the kingdom, but after the joy of reunion, she scolds him and expresses her disappointment in him. "You're not who I remembered," she tells him. Nala shakes him up and reminds him that he can be much more than he is today. She despises this childish behavior, but she doesn't despise him. She still sees his potential, and therefore it hurts her that he sets such a low bar for himself. She encourages him to be the best version of himself. So this is your unique role as a woman. Here you can bring the man the maximum added value in his life, and if you'll be the one thanks to whom he realizes himself, he will know this and appreciate you for it, and both of you will be satisfied. He for having grown up and having responsibility and a sense of meaning, and you for having a man you can rely on to be present and care for you and your children. So remember this role of yours. Don't be tempted to become his mother. You need to manage your maternal instinct so that it encourages the man to take responsibility and not cause you to take responsibility instead of him. And this also means you need to know when you're dealing with an eternal child and need to retreat and move on without him, as Wendy did. Thank you for watching.